Technology has played a pivotal role in human life. It has made what was once impossible, possible. From the smartwatch we wear to the vaccines that have been developed, the impact and advantages of technology on our lives today can simply not be ignored. The use of technologies like cloud data, artificial intelligence, machine learning and blockchain are growing rapidly, but they can be energy intensive. If left unchecked, the global ICT sector's carbon emissions could contribute approximately 15% of global emissions by 2040. These carbon emissions raise global temperatures and alter water supplies and weather patterns. The threat to the environment is real. We need to move fast before it is too late. There is no better time than now to act. Our future is in our hands to hold. Hear from our speakers and discover how we can achieve a sustainable future through technology together.
Hello everyone, I'm Asma Mir and I'm absolutely delighted to be here today in Glasgow, best city in the world, to guide you through Accenture's Sustainable Future Through Technology discussions as part of COP26, of course, and our collective pursuit of global net zero. Now, the opening video, which you've just seen, not only reveals that technology's carbon footprint is growing, but it highlights the role that organisations and businesses really need to play in meeting the goals we set at COP26. Now, it's also increasingly clear that sustainability goals and measurable plans to achieve them are essential for global businesses to be successful and profitable in the future. Now, it's exciting to know that recent Accenture research reveals how new value is increasingly being found at the intersection of digital technologies and sustainability, and that the companies leveraging it, known as twin transformers, were 2.5 times more likely to be among tomorrow's strongest performing businesses than others. So just think about that. So how can technology enable a sustainable future? This is what we are going to be focusing on during our session today. Now, our first session is a keynote from Accenture's Sanjay Poddar. It's called Delivering on the Promise of Sustainability Value Through Technology, where he will highlight how organizations can do it, how they can integrate sustainability, technology and business strategies to help them deliver on their commitments. This is followed by a panel discussion where we'll hear from companies and Accenture experts on reducing technology's carbon footprint through sustainable data and cloud. And in that session, we'll be examining how data and the cloud can both be used to their full potential, but in a sustainable way. Next, we have a panel of speakers from the recently created Green Software Foundation to educate us on what green software is and share insights into the groundbreaking work the foundation is doing to enable green software engineering. So we have a really busy, action-packed event lined up for you, so let's get started, shall we? First, delivering on the promise of sustainability value through technology. Please join me in welcoming Sanjay Poddar, Managing Director and Global Lead of Technology Sustainability at Accenture. Now, I'm sure some of you know Sanjay has a passion for using digital technologies to develop innovative solutions to achieve sustainable development goals. And he believes that now, more than ever, organizations need to prioritize sustainability, continue to be successful and profitable. Sanjay also has more than 36 patents in software engineering and was recognized as an Eisenhower Fellow in 2017 for his leadership in building a just and peaceful world using technology. So, over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you so much, Asma. And it's an absolute delight to join this COP26 session on sustainable technology, delivering the promise of sustainability value through technology. So as you have heard, myself as well as my team of innovators, we have been exploring this whole space of how do we reimagine solutions to these exponential problems which are so well articulated as the Sustainable Development Goals. Technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, IoT, all these technologies in isolation as well as in combination can really help you imagine solutions that can scale, that can solve the challenges in the SDGs, which were earlier very difficult to address. So we have worked in space, for example, decarbonizing software, which you'll hear more of in this session. You will also, we have worked in areas like biodiversity protection, for example, detecting the vulnerable species like gibbons in the rainforest, or identifying the bird species, or in areas like in support of inclusion and diversity, focusing on financial inclusion of women in the villages, as well as ensuring that no child is deprived of education because of hunger. In all these areas and more, we have used all these latest technologies that are coming like tsunamis in our shore every year, year on year. But we quickly realized that while technology will play a big role of an enabler, it is by itself not sufficient. And what is also required is the power of an ecosystem, because these are complex problems and nobody can solve alone. And you have to co-innovate with the impacted population. We also realize that businesses, for them, there's a huge opportunity here, and therefore sustainability has to be embedded in everything we do. Moving on to the next slide, the important point here is that sustainability is the new digital. Just as digital has changed the way we live, work, and play, so will sustainability. Businesses will have to embrace sustainability because of multiple reasons. There's a huge shift from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. Businesses have to answer questions being raised by various stakeholders, whether it's their own employees, the customers, the regulators, the investors. It's no longer sufficient to focus on financial performance alone, but you are measured by your environmental, social, and governance impact. It is therefore not surprising that in the past we said every business is a technology business. Now we are saying every business will also be a sustainable business. By 2025, businesses have to ensure that they are putting sustainability as an integral part of their business strategy and model. What's the role of technology in this? If we move to the next slide, we all know that technology will be one of the greatest sustainability enablers. Our survey proves this point, where 96% of CTOs agree that technology is important to achieve their priority SDGs. We know how, for example, the cloud is being increasingly used by business to make itself more resilient, agile, creating new products, services, and customer experience, and at the same time, reducing carbon emissions and creating a sustainable technology stack that enables them to have a much more sustainable and inclusive business model. At the same time, technologies like blockchain, for example, is helping us create multi-party systems that enable more trust. But technology has its own dark secret. Artificial intelligence, for example, or deep learning. The MIT study, for example, shows that training a single AI model can emit as much carbon as 5 average-sized American cars in the lifetime. This is significant. Similarly, a Cambridge researchers study came up with this number that the Bitcoin network, which is based on blockchain, today is consuming more electricity than the entire country of Switzerland. And there are many such interesting examples. One can always argue about the numbers, but there is no denying the fact that the information and communication technology today is emitting carbon because it is using a lot of electricity, which has carbon intensity, and the softwares are not engineered for using less energy, less electricity. And it is therefore very important that we do something about it. Left unchecked, the projected contribution of the information and communication technology sector on global greenhouse gas emission is 14% by 2040. Can we do something about this? Absolutely. Our study shows that we can decouple this growth of GHG emissions from business growth or greater adoption of technology, digital technology in the society. There are principles to be followed in the way we design, build, deploy, and operate our digital systems. The good news is that our survey shows that the CTOs and CIOs are aware of the impact of the technology stack that they have. They, however, need help to understand what they can do to address this issue. Our survey also showed that close to half of the companies we surveyed, they have already adopted sustainable technology and have seen an increase in their revenue because of sustainable technology. They are able to use sustainable technology to create new business. They have been able to create different customer, a much more enhanced customer experience, and also attract talent. So these are good early success, but you can do a lot more. In fact, what we see is that only 7% of companies have fully integrated their sustainability and technology strategies. In many organizations, sustainability is still not a KPI, a key performance indicator of the CIO or CTO. Moving ahead, why is this happening? What are the key challenges the CTOs and CIOs will face in embracing sustainable technology? Our study shows that the number one challenge is this is a new area. It lacks industry standards, methodologies, and metrics. These have to be established. There's a lack of solutions and the right talent to lead them. In fact, in some cases, there may be confusion because there are so many different solutions without a clarity of which solution should be used where. Take the space of ESG, for example. And finally, complexity. This journey to embrace sustainable technology is not easy, it is complex. Take example of many organizations today still trying to figure out how they can effectively embrace the public cloud and move from the data center, from their own data center. So these are great opportunities. And these are some of the challenges that organizations are facing. So how can companies integrate sustainability into their technology and business strategy to make the business fit for the future? Let me share some ideas here. For one, CIOs, CTOs need to be part of the leadership forums being set by organizations for sustainability. Sustainability should be a part of their key performance indicators. This doesn't mean that sustainable technology is just a CTO's objective or priority. It's a CXO priority because sustainable technology will address various sustainability challenges an organization faces, right from the CEO, the decarbonization challenge, the CHRO, enabling their people for jobs of future, the chief procurement officer, ensuring that sustainable procurement can be done, for the chief marketing officer, creating sustainable brands. In all these cases, you will need sustainable technology. Now, how do you embrace the sustainable technology into the business strategy? So there is three things I'll suggest here. The first one is embed sustainability in technology. You want your technology stack to be inherently energy efficient, emitting less carbon, and also address issues like waste at the end of life cycle of end user devices and so on and so forth. So embed sustainability in technology. We did a very interesting project with an access management global company out of Nordics, where we embedded 50 best practices of sustainable software engineering in their sustainability compass, which not only increased the awareness of sustainability in the product development team, but they had the right questions at every stage of the sustainable development life cycle to consider whether they are taking the right decisions from a sustainability point of view, making sustainability a first-class concern in their product development process. The next aspect is how do you drive sustainability by technology? And a very good example would be what has been achieved in Vietnam, where a lot of the drinking water for people comes from large rivers, 65% of the water. And there is a lot of impact of industrial pollution. Now, for the citizens, they have no idea what the quality of water is. It is important that you can monitor it, you can forecast the water quality, and you can let the citizens know. So Japan International Collaboration Agency, along with Accenture and many other players, we have created an AI model, a machine learning model. We have used IoT sensors, and with the help of this model, and along with some deep tech startups, we are able to now monitor and forecast and advise the citizens of water quality. The third aspect of embedding sustainable technology is sustainable technology at scale. Now, as I said, this is a new area and nobody can do it alone. So it's very important for organizations either to join relevant consortiums or create one. For example, you will hear today about the Green Software Foundation, which was created last May by Accenture, Microsoft, GitHub, ThoughtWorks, WhatTime, and many others. And we are collectively trying to solve this problem to accelerate the innovation and to scale the impact. A similar example is where we have created a group with an ecosystem with Microsoft, with social entrepreneurs, deep tech startups called Amplify. And we are having the goal, the audacious goal of helping 1 million smallholding farmers by 2025 using verified telemetry, the Azure stack, and creating a low-cost solution for small-holding farmers, aquaculture farmers, to increase their farm productivity. In this case, the fish production. Many of these farmers are women, rural women. So in the process, we are helping them in financial inclusion as well. By advising them on the right quantity of feed, we are able to even reduce the problems of challenges of emission and pollution. Finally, to take the time to act is now, and you have to create an organization which is fit for the future with sustainable technology. Embed sustainability in technology, drive sustainability by technology, and scale sustainability by leveraging the technology ecosystem partners. Sustainability plus technology gives you leadership in your industry. So I am extremely delighted to join this conversation with all of you, and I'm looking forward to 2 excellent panels where they'll go a bit more deeper, share practical insights and best practices in the area of sustainable technology. Thank you so much. Handing over back to Asma.
Thank you so much, Sanjay, for those insights and examples, just concrete examples really of how technology is enabling sustainability in a variety of ways. So as Sanjay said, we're going to dig a bit deeper into some real-life challenges on the journey of sustainability and what companies have done so far to successfully move forward on their net zero journey. Joining us in our panel are Accenture experts and leaders from BT and Microsoft, who both, of course, have well-developed pathways to a more sustainable future. So I'd like now to turn this over to Chris Howarth, Senior Managing Director at Accenture and lead for the Accenture Microsoft Business Group, who will facilitate the panel discussion. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Asma, and a huge thank you also to Sanjay. There were some incredible insights there to get us going, and many of which we will, I'm sure, start to dive in a little bit deeper. In our panel today, we're going to really focus in on data and technology adoption and usage and the impact of cloud, ICT and other technologies. First of all, though, I just want to say welcome to the room. It's great to see some real faces in person, and also welcome to everyone who's joining us virtually for today's discussion. My name's Chris Howarth. I'm a Senior Managing Director at Accenture. I look after the Accenture Microsoft Business Group globally. And I'm also very delighted to welcome onto the stage Ralph and Andy, as we mentioned. So I'll do quick intros. Feel free to elaborate once we get going. But Ralph Hapter, the Microsoft President of the EMEA region. Welcome, Ralph. And Andy Wales, Chief Digital Impact and Sustainability Officer for BT. And also, you're smaller on that screen, Vishal, but Vishal Talwar, who's our Senior Managing Director. He's the Global Sales Solutions and Offering Lead for our Cloud First business. One of the reasons Vishal is virtual today is that he, with his family, has been celebrating Diwali this week. So happy Diwali, and thanks for taking the time out, and the same happy Diwali to the room and to anybody joining us virtually today. So we're going to jump straight into it. And Sanjay mentioned, I get a few rumblings in the room when he said about the dark secret, right, of technology. And actually, I don't know if it is so much of a dark secret anymore. I think it's just a reality we face into, which is technology in and itself drives an amount of carbon emissions and footprint. And I think, also, it's irrefutable that we're going to continue to see an increase of usage of technology, data explosion, and for some amazing purposes as well, such as the UN's goal to get, to go from 70% to 100% of the population with access to internet by 2030. So we're going to see this. Both of those things are a reality. But I guess one thing I'd like to, and maybe Andy, if you could open us up on this, I'd like to explore the topic of how do we support that exponential growth, which is going to happen around the technology side, while also trying to minimize that growth around, or even reduce around, technology. And I know that BT and Accenture have done some research into this called Harnessing Data to Empower a Sustainable Future. And I'd like for you to maybe give some insights to start with of the findings of where that impact is today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And great to see you all. So I guess to start with, I think the key thing to start with is why. Why did we do that research together? And it's great to have Lauren Ing here and her team who did the kind of research from Accenture with BT. And I think, to perhaps have a little bit of tension in the panel, we need to be a little bit careful about demonizing tech and data too quickly. And we've got to be really careful about demonizing that in the context of where we're going forwards. Because there are many in the sector who, in tech and telco, who are dramatically driving down emissions and enabling a dramatic growth in data while still pushing emissions even lower. And there's a kind of natural tendency in the media and the public perception to think that if you are absorbing a lot of data, if you're enjoying a Champions League game on your mobile phone, if you are doing Fortnite downloads are a big part of our network load. If you're doing something that feels like it involves a lot of bandwidth, it must be bad. It's not true. So, BT, biggest network in the UK, biggest mobile network, biggest fixed network. We're already at 100% renewable power, therefore one of the biggest buyers of renewable power in the world. Driven emissions down 80% between 2008 and 2016. We're going to drive it another 87% down to 2030 and then get net zero. We set the world's third 1.5-degree science-based target from the corporate sector. And actually, if you look across our whole sector, the leaders in telco and tech are pushing this extremely hard. And so the basis for that research was to understand if we expect, as we do, an increase in data of maybe 8 times between now and 2030, which is roughly the same as we had from 2010 to now, enabling all of our lives in very different and exciting ways, what does that mean from an energy and an emissions perspective? And from an energy perspective, it's roughly flat. Because although we have an 8 times data increase, because you've got dramatic gains in my part of the sector, full fibre instead of copper, you've got 5G instead of 4G, you've got the cloud instead of on-site computing, the dramatic energy gains there. So energy is roughly flat, but then emissions will plummet because of the commitments that the sector have made. So globally about 40% between now and 2030. In the UK, it's actually about 70%, we project. And so there's a lot of upside there. So where I think that we should focus our messaging and thinking as a sector as the second piece that we heard in the presentation, which is how we can enable customers, big parts of the economy, to reduce emissions. Because that's where the second part of the report was, that about 8.5 gigatons, 17% of global emissions, could be eliminated by the tech that we're developing and taking to market being fully deployed. And if we can do that well, if we can help customers understand those opportunities, I think that's a narrative we should be being excited about and sharing more aggressively.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andy. And I know we'll return back to some of those themes, especially the cross-industry themes, as we go through today. Ralph, I was going to move to you next. I know this is a topic you're personally passionate about and sponsor heavily within Microsoft. But I was actually looking for, as you open, could you give some perspectives of the clients you talk to and what they are seeing, and when you are invariably having conversations with them about taking on new and exciting technologies with Microsoft, what are their challenges, concerns that they're raising in relation to the impact of that technology?
Yeah. Again, thanks from my side having the chance to be on this panel here. I think the starting point is also a bit where Andy has been. The matter of the fact is that GDP, roughly produced all GDP, will have a 70% digital footprint. So whatever we do as a society, there's a digital footprint. It's not revocable. I think also we see that the need of data and kind of the society and usage data, the companies building data, and us getting better through data is also not disputable. So then you sit here and say, wow, what is the implication? For us, we see clearly with our commitment that by 2030 we will be negative on our carbon footprint. There's a way to go from a technology perspective, but also from an invest and usage perspective. So by 2030, we basically start putting back carbon, which we have produced up to that time. I mean, that's on how we want to change ourselves and bring it forward. Then we operate all this technology, and we know on a global basis these companies together have roughly 4% of all energy consumption to run and operate cloud technology, compute technology on the planet right now. So what can you do, and how do you take it from there? First of all, we have invested ourselves just in the last 12 months. I think we have almost put 40 contracts in place where we buy carbon neutral energy. This is across 15 countries, just Sweden, Denmark, UK, to name some, where we are very intentional on how we actually deliver technology and doing it in a way where we have carbon neutral footprint. That's one. Second, we have given ourselves the mission by 25, our data centers are carbon neutral, and we have a clear mission where we say 100, 100, 0. So 100% of energy, 100% of time used will have zero carbon impact. So what we try by this one is giving actually a platform for usage of technology where you can kind of take the best and work on it. And that brings us to the customer side on how we think and what we're experiencing from customers right now. We did a quick survey, I would say, here in the UK, where we touched almost 1,800 executives and 2,000 employees of different companies, understanding where they are on their sustainability journey. And it turned out that only 95% of them have a real understanding on how they are in the sustainable process. And only and more than 70% think they have only one step done in a real journey. So back to Sanjay's point, is it connected to the technology? Is it connected to strategy? It is not. And so this is where we feel we can the job do in helping companies, making technology and being part of the sustainability story. And that's the request we are getting. Reason why we announced coming to COP26 our sustainable cloud infrastructure. So this is first time a platform where companies across their experience can start collect data and get better in building it into the strategy they have. And that's the mission we have, where we say we want to record, reduce, and report the way their impact is on carbon first, and then we do water and waste later. But as a start, that was important for us that we look at data produced and give companies so a measure of decision.
Okay, fantastic, Rob. And I think plays a lot to what you were saying, Andy. When you look at that's some startling admissions by companies of how immature they are on that journey compared to the focus I think that there is in the tech sector today. I'm going to, Vishal, I'd like to put the next question to you. Sanjay also mentioned in his opening just how difficult some companies are finding to make the journey to cloud, and therefore to have the kind of impact they'd like from a sustainable perspective. But I know also from an Accenture Cloud First perspective, we've done a lot of research of companies, primarily was looking at performance and adopters of the cloud, and the work is called the Cloud Continuum. And in that research, we found not only from a high performance perspective as an organization and a link to cloud adoption, but also a very strong link to those companies achieving a much higher performance against their SDGs. And it wasn't necessarily something we were expecting. And I guess what I'd like, Vishal, is if you could give us some of your perspectives about those companies, and it's still a relatively small group, as I understand, of companies, but what are they doing, and how is that going to drive more interest from more companies?
So, absolutely, Chris. And, it has to go back with the point that, Andy was making earlier as well. We have to stop demonizing technology and the sort of data consumption that's happening. So when you look at this small group of folks that we are calling as the Cloud Continuum or the Continuum competitors, this are a set of enterprises that are not just leveraging cloud-based technologies, but more importantly, they're instituting practices that learn or unleash the full breadth of benefits these technologies have to offer. For example, even towards their strategic sustainability goals. And this group is 3 times more likely than others to have at least 2 strategic sustainability goals. And they're also taking deliberate actions towards them. So 70% of them are doing with fewer servers. 40% are using servers with greater efficiency. 30% are architecting for greener IT than on-prem. And what our study has shown is that 70% of these have reduced their carbon footprint. So in short, this group is looking and identifying opportunities for more sustainable operations, and they're acting on them, and the results are starting to show. If you look at the other things, back to where Andy was saying, all hyperscalers are reporting energy efficiency and carbon efficient solutions. To Ralph's point, as an example, Microsoft Azure platform can be 93% more energy efficient and 98% more carbon efficient. So if we have to bring this awareness to our clients and organizations so that they understand that leveraging these cloud-based technologies, migrating to the public cloud, can not only help them, achieve their financial or economic value case, but also help them accelerate their ESG agenda, as you outlined.
I think we'll also come back to the kind of the value case in a later question, because I think there's going to be very strong linkage between that and that performance. Andy, I want to go back a little bit more depth on the research. You mentioned that significant progress the ICT sector is making. But you have many technology leaders listening to this today. What do you think are the key priorities or the success factors that we're going to need to focus on to ensure that is a reality, the commitments that are being made in the sector?
Yeah, I think there's 3 parts to that. We clearly need to mobilize the entire sector to really strong net zero commitments. So I think, we have some leaders here. There are many leaders here in Glasgow this week. There's still significant chunks of the sector globally that are not there yet. And so we have an obligation, I think, to get our ecosystem to move with us. Primarily on climate, but also on circular economy, actually, where e-waste is obviously a very rapid growing issue. So I think there's the race to zero commitments. There's BT's part of this SME hub and kind of equipping SMEs to move forward in our sector. So I think there's a real challenge for all of us to mobilize the sector. I think the second piece is then we must think about how we enable customers. Because and that's about the new technologies we take, but it's also about helping people understand the insight that those technologies are providing. And there are lots of different customers in different sectors who I don't think yet fully understand the level of insight they can get and then how to execute. So, for example, in the public sector, BT has street hubs. You'll see them all around Glasgow with ads on, which lots and lots of companies are talking about how good they're doing on the climate. But actually, in those, we're able to put, free air quality sensors and pollution sensors, then give data to local authorities around the UK to give them real-time insights into what's going on in their cities. It's information they haven't had before, and they don't necessarily know how to best use it. And so there's something about enabling. And then there's also a piece on the consumer side, because I think there's a real fear in consumers and citizens about the impact of climate change and what they can realistically do. We did some research with an agency earlier this year that asked people across the UK in different segments, different age groups, what they were most concerned about in life. And it was, just as COVID was still very rife. And so mental health and physical health were the two top ones. But climate came third very quickly. But half of people didn't know what they could do about it. And so that's where the power of brands to actually talk to people in a positive way. We've got 30 million consumers in the UK, biggest consumer-facing company. To enable them to think about the daily things they can do, we launched a thing called the Big Sofa Summit, which was one of our first consumer comms on climate, which is about not just world leaders here making a difference on climate, but actually anyone at home sitting on the sofa talking about what you can do day to day and how you can use things, including tech in a smart home. And so I think it's about empowering, giving people confidence to actually use the insight that we're able to provide.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. And you'd hope also that third linkage on the importance consumers are putting on it will also help with that groundswell of organisations moving towards collectively. Yeah. And I think Ralph Vishal, maybe Ralph, if you take this one first, there's sometimes a criticism that can be levelled at entire processes like COP26 about how practical examples and how real-time things can companies do today to get on this journey. And you mentioned those kind of startling numbers, Ralph, about the amount that don't feel, by their own admission, they are either on the journey or very accelerated. So what would be some of the practical ways that you would be encouraging organisations to get started and to really start to make a difference on this topic?
Yeah, maybe I start with a customer example, which I kind of experienced, and it gives a bit the trigger, which I think is the reading we see right now, what makes company work and kick off the exercise. So if you take Outokumpu is a steel manufacturing company, which is obviously super exposed, high energy, complicated product in all dimensions. But they have taken an approach to focus on their energy consumption in the production of the product, and they basically connected the quality and the output of the product with their energy consumption. And by doing so, they established within the organization a clear cultural understanding on what is the product you're doing, what is actually the impact we have with that one on the carbon footprint. And by doing so, they moved themselves being 30% more effective than the industry standard on energy consumption in producing goods. So what is the learning or what is the reflection I see out of this case? I would say there are three pieces. There's one which is speaks to my heart, to my core, where I say the things you can measure, you can operate. And so they did the same. They started to measure data within their company, and then they operate against that data. That's one. The second, I would say they had a cultural change, which is also a bit a learning out of the study we did in the UK, which I mentioned before. So in that study, it was clear that companies are missing clarity on strategy and missing clarity on government guidance. So they have been more intentional on what their strategy is and how they actually deliver their organizational capabilities to execute against sustainability. But they also have not been waiting for regulatory frameworks. So I think that's the goodness here for this conference. A lot of more clarity can come out so that companies feel a better framework and operate. And then the third one, what I'm experiencing right now is super important, is that companies start thinking in ecosystems. So it's not only about what you have on your hands yourself as a company. You need to understand who is your partner on production ecosystem and get them into your balance. And that makes, I think, the bigger impact, but it also makes it more executable in what we see in market, which is, again, the reason why we think our approach to help is building a platform to collect all these informations, because we believe this ecosystem is super important.
And I guess it's, in turn, then will drive the decision makings about who is in your ecosystem.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I think it's going to, have a double impact. Vishal, obviously, that practicality point sometimes is made on unfairly, of course, to us as consultants. But do you want to give your perspective from on the same point about some practical examples of how to get going on this?
I will, absolutely. And I have to say, Ralph, the 3 points that I would have outlined are exactly those. You can't improve what you can't measure. You have to take a cultural mindset shift to make progress in this space, and it takes a village. So leverage the village in the ecosystem. So I'm going to speak to Chris in terms of what are we doing to help organizations across all of these 3 dimensions. So if you look at what you can't improve what you can't measure. Back to the point that was being made earlier as well, most companies today don't understand the impact of the IT, the carbon impact of their IT footprint. And they don't understand just for every choice that they're making, what's the implication on their sustainability agenda. So the one thing that we've done is we've invested extensively in creating this, data and tool-based sort of a navigation system, if you will. We call it the, MyNav Green Cloud Advisor, that puts those data and insights into the hands of our clients and practitioners within our clients' organizations that expose to them the implications of the choices that they're making, and gives them the optionality at every step of the way for different, options that they could sort of engage to drive towards their sustainability agenda and their organization's sustainability agenda. So as an example, we were working with a major retailer in North America who had sort of set this goal for themselves to get net zero carbon emissions by 2040. Now, as they had this goal, they also were looking to sort of exit their data centers, but they weren't able to tie exiting their data center towards the sustainability goal that was, that was set by themselves more strategically. So we helped them through this MyNav Green Cloud Advisor understand what sort of impact would migrating 7,000 servers to a public cloud entail for them. And not every cloud migration journey is same. There are certain choices that you can make along those journeys to make your migration more green. It's, how much do you change the application footprint? We were speaking about deep learning earlier. Where do you train the algorithm? Do you train them in, Sweden? Do you train them in Estonia? Where do you train them? You train them in a low carbon emission, footprint country. You train them also at times which are more, that are less carbon intense. So how do you raise this awareness and you bring this insight to clients as they're making these choices? And what we realized is, making it a tool-based and data-led journey always helps. So that's the first thing around, how can we help organizations, measure and then continue to. So once you've sort of baselined, you have to continue to then also report the progress. What we are seeing is, like with another agriculture company, they were on their 5-year cloud migration journey, but they were not sort of reporting on the progress they were making on the sustainability agenda as a result of that journey. When they realized that, from 5 years, they can accelerate down to 4 years, and the impact that it'll have, also the different ways they can face their journey and the impact that it has on sustainability agenda, they started to get more excited about it. And in both these cases, the retailer and this agriculture organization, they were able to save about 85% of their carbon emission footprint compared to when they were on-prem or their legacy technology landscape. So, I'll end it with where, Ralph said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you really want to go far, and if you want to literally play on the word sustainability and you want to continue to sustain that momentum, leverage the breadth of the investments that ecosystem is making in this space. Andy referred to, the investments that BT is making. Leverage that ecosystem, leverage those capabilities, and create awareness about what leveraging those capabilities, sort of impact make on your sustainability agenda as an organization. And I think if we continue to put that data and insight in the hands of our practitioners, we will get to a more sustainable green environment that we all seek.
Fantastic, thanks Vishaan, and great alignment there, and great examples, I think, of the kind of the three key areas of focus. Andy, I said earlier we'd come back to your point about the impact on other industries, and I was certainly fascinated reading the research of, first of all, a very good reflection on the ICT sector, but actually the impact you could potentially have on other industries that are having a bigger effect at the moment on the kind of environmental challenge. So I just wondered if you could highlight a couple of the examples of how you think ICT can have a big impact on other industries.
Absolutely. But I think the most important message is that every sector can have we can have a dramatic impact in every sector. Right? There's no sector that will be untouched by some of the things that our sector can enable. There are some really, really big chunks of emissions to go for, though, the biggest of which is transport. So of about the 8.5 gigatons that we think the sector can help reduce, half of that roughly is in global transport, and that's because we need to see such a massive change in the global transport system. And it's all the obvious things around machine learning based on traffic flows and improving emissions in last mile deliveries and all the changing things we see with current technology. And then, of course, it's about the dramatic shift of the system overall to electrification, ultimately for some of the heavier vehicles to hydrogen. And that's where actually BT has skin in the game as well, because we're the second largest vehicle fleet operator in the UK. And so after electricity, the next biggest set of emissions for us is transport. And so we have set up with the Climate Group about a year ago a group called the UK Electric Fleet Coalition. We got 30 companies together quite rapidly in about 6 months, Tesco, Unilever, the Royal Mail. Together, interestingly, with Greenpeace, we then called on the UK government to bring forward the petrol and diesel vehicle ban to 2030, which many people called for that, and they did, which was great. And now we're working with the UK Prime Minister in his Build Back Better business coalition to build something called the EV Van Accelerator, which is around all the things that you need to do to transform a whole system in a country like the UK, gigafactory investment, interoperability between charging systems, kind of payment systems, grid resilience, as well as vehicle manufacture. So I think what's interesting is that there's clear and obvious things that our technologies can do and enable, but we can demonstrate it through the way that we're transforming our own supply chains. There are other sectors. Smart manufacturing opportunities are huge. BT has products that we sell to our multinational customers in that space. We've already talked about agriculture, so probably not to go there again. And then I think although there are some very difficult transition journeys that heavy emitting sectors have got to go on. And I think, again, insights into the improvements in their processes, even quite small improvements, can make quite big changes because of the overall level of their footprint.
Excellent, and thanks. And I think reflects back a lot to the other topic we had about not only having an impact but being part of that change, right? So actually instigating it, being part of it, and bringing that ecosystem along. And I think we'll close on one final topic, and maybe Ralph, you can lead off with this one. Obviously, nobody will dispute the importance of this topic, especially not in the couple of weeks and the focus that we've got on this now, but also, the research you saw earlier. This is an important thing for everyone. But obviously, companies have to also face into the return on the investments they're going to make on this topic for their shareholders, but also for their employees or as privately owned companies. So what are some of the things that you're seeing, Ralph, where as well as the importance of doing this for the reasons we've talked a lot about today, companies are actually using this to pay back and are seeing a return on the investment? We can use that to inspire other companies to go on this journey.
I actually think there's one more component to this one where it's paying back to others. It's like the company itself is building a different culture and asset in that mindset using technology. And so what I'm experiencing right now more and more, and we just get together actually with you requests from customers where they want to understand how they can help their employees being part of the economical understanding, but also of the footprint they have as a company. So we see now situations where organizations are really going deep and saying, how can I empower each employee to understand through his daily work what kind of footprint they have, what kind of carbon footprint they have by making decisions where they work, how they work, what tools they use. I think that's a big one. So as a big one, big really structural one, I would really say getting this involvement of employees seems to me a next big change and a different approach on how companies think about technology and how the employees of companies think about the usage of technology. So I'm actually hoping there's a step change in that one. From an industry perspective, I think Andy had a couple of fantastic ones, which I didn't know, and it's fantastic. I mean, it's literally exciting to see because we're all learning and reshaping our organizations. But for me personally, I would say the trends we see on the energy sector and the trends we see in the manufacturing sector are exciting. So on the energy, most exposed companies, but actually the ones which I feel can be having the fastest impact by using data and insights. We saw that with a company called Rapso, where they just massively used AI to understand their energy production and distribution. And that brought immediately economical benefits, but it also was playing back to the culture of the company and change of the culture of the company. Andy mentioned it with, I think you call it smart factories or a small. This is what is happening right now. On all shop floors is massive opportunity to save. So you can go today to production companies and actually tell them this building doesn't need carbon power anymore if you do it well and right with technology. And I think this is changing the opportunity and the way to talk through that one, which I feel excited as much as the challenge is hard. The way to talk about this and the way to actually act on this one is right now here and starts to get clearer by day, I would say.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. And I love that cultural payback, right? Again, harder to put into a business case, but you'll feel it straight away, I'm sure, in the organizations that take this seriously and go on this journey. And I know, Michelle, you've probably got a perspective on this, but just in the interest of time, I'm just going to do a quick check first, Asma, on any questions that have come through that we might want to pose to the panel.
Two questions, actually. Would you like them just now?
Yeah, we can go.
Okay, Andy, this is for you, first of all. Now, you've already talked about the electric vehicles, but this one says, can you share some of the initiatives that you've done at BT to drive sustainability in your operations?
Well, I guess the key thing is understanding the big chunks of emissions you need to remove. And BT actually set its first carbon target back in '92, so I'm kind of standing on the shoulders of those who came before me. But power was the biggest thing and dramatically reduced emissions within the operations. Then electric vehicles. The next thing is heating for buildings. And so that's about, as we change our building strategy, close old exchanges, open new ones, making sure that we're putting in place the right heating systems. There's obviously, as Ralph said, a really important piece around engaging colleagues and getting colleagues energized and understanding what they can do. And then I think that the bit that our whole sector needs to run at harder is circular economy and our products and services, the e-waste challenge and all the embedded emissions and pollution up the supply chain in those products and how we can tackle that together.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a big issue.
Absolutely. Ralph, maybe you can answer this one. It's another question here. What are the institutional barriers to hosting data in the cloud across countries and the impact on sustainability?
That's a longer question. I'm not sure it's a sustainability question. I think it goes back to the feedback we got through this research we did in the UK here with the decision makers, where they basically said we need to better understand what is the real governance for sustainability. So what are KPIs which are measured? What does the ESG report need to look like to be trusted and used and repeatable? And I think that is maybe in that specific context, not a barrier, but an opportunity to say the more clarity we have on this type of reportings and goaling and joint usage of language and definitions, I think that is accelerating the execution for companies.
Okay. Vishal, do you want to come in on that? What do you think the barriers are in hosting data to hosting data in the cloud across countries?
So, first and foremost, there is the regulatory barriers that exist. But in my view, as more and more we're looking at this, there are a lot of self-inflicted barriers. And it's, I call them as artificial constraints. And our sense is, as you start to get into the public cloud, you can start to take more advantages of these low carbon emitting and efficient geographies and locations. For example, when we speak about this deep learning piece, training an algorithm in a high carbon emitting region is 960 grams of carbon per kilowatt hour of compute that you consume. 960 as an example through a study done by Carnegie Mellon. That same one in a more efficient carbon emitting region is 16 grams. 16, 960. When you start to put, to Ralph's point, that sort of information in the hands of the practitioners and the decision makers and the stakeholders, my sense is we'll start to make smarter choices and the artificial barriers and constraints will go away. The second thing that I'll leave you with, and the last thing I'll leave you with is, where cloud and data is concerned, we are actually in a pretty sweet spot, because the more you get to the cloud and more you leverage the cloud-based technologies, the better is your financial performance, and the better are your sustainability performance as well. So, for example, in the research that we did 2013 to 2019, companies with high performance ESG had 4.7 times better operating margin than the ones that did not. So, we all know getting to public cloud is more efficient. It gets your business to be more agile. It gets your business to be more flexible. We just have to continue to tie that message with also the sustainability goals it helps advance. Once everybody in their mind starts to see that linkage, my sense is these artificial constraints will go away, and these barriers that we so self-inflict on ourselves would not exist. The regulatory ones would have absolutely, of course, still stay, but the others are not that many. The real barriers don't exist.
Thank you for that, Vishal. Just one finally. I mean, a lot of these questions kind of go over the same ground, that they are linked, but just in case someone specifically asked this question, let's put it anyway. We've heard so much about the benefits of cloud migration. Can you share with us some of the common challenges or pitfalls of migration to cloud, and how can the migration be done as sustainably as possible? Ralph?
I actually think this is a generic question on cloud migration. It doesn't have anything in goodness with the topic of sustainability. The benefits and the migration is, I would say, depending on the skills in the company. So it's a technology where we have just opportunity to use services in a very different way. And having the skill set in a company, how to benefit from these cloud services is the difference. So our single biggest invests in companies going to the cloud is actually training employees how to use all these services which are available. And that is the fastest accelerator of adoption. And I would say the single biggest pitfall where people say, I'm not training my staff on the new technology. That is done. That's the fastest accelerator and the biggest driver for success.
Okay. Here's an open question. Anyone can answer this. Do you expect the growth of blockchain and relevant emissions to slow progress in the industry? Who wants to tackle that one?
Vishal, do you want to have a go at that one?
The answer to that is a simple answer is emphatic no. We don't expect. We expect any of these to only advance both the business as well as the ESG agenda.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'll leave it to you to finish up and thank our guests.
Yeah, so just thank you, obviously, for these fantastic insights. Thank you for Vishal and attending during your celebrations this week, and thank you all for attending today and everybody online. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chris and panel guests. I hope you enjoyed that. It was incredibly interesting. I know that I learned a lot, and I hope that you did too. Now, next up is something very close to all of our hearts, of course, software. We use software every day in our work and personal lives. Some of you are using it right now. Have you ever wondered how much carbon software actually emits? On its own, software doesn't consume energy or create emissions, but software's energy use is embedded, of course, in how it is developed and how it's deployed and used. Software and hardware are inextricably linked and need to coexist together as efficiently as possible. A computer, a notebook, even a smartphone can only be as energy efficient as the software allows. That makes sense, of course. Although it is the hardware that consumes energy, it is the software that triggers the consumption of this energy. All these things that we just take for granted, but actually if you think about it, the impact is huge. The way that software is designed, developed and deployed can therefore have a major impact on energy consumption. So I'd like now to turn this back to Sanjay Poddar, Managing Director and Global Lead for Technology, Sustainability, Innovation at Accenture, and a steering member of the Green Software Foundation, who will facilitate this panel discussion. Sanjay, over to you.
Thank you so much, Asma. And I'm absolutely delighted to have my fellow panelists today who are extremely passionate on this topic of green software engineering, and also we'll talk a little bit on the Green Software Foundation. So we have today Aseem Hussain. Aseem is the Green Cloud Advocacy Lead in Microsoft, but even more interesting is his role as a chairperson of the Green Software Foundation. And we have Henry Richardson from WattTime, and Henry has done a lot of interesting work in the area of how do you reduce emissions and intelligent carbon aware digital and things like that. And we'll hear more from Henry as well as on carbon accounting. And of course, Professor Zilian Zhong from the Computer Science Department of Texas State University with years of research in this space. So the Green Software Foundation, before we start, was launched in May of this year by Accenture, Microsoft, GitHub, ThoughtWorks, WattTime, and we have many, many members across the globe. And the members, they are large technology companies, industry leaders, nonprofits, academia, as well as individual members. So it's a very, very inclusive group. And we will try to share what's happening in the Green Software Foundation as well. So the very first question goes to Aseem. Aseem, I know you're very passionate about this topic, but can you help us understand what is green software? What is green software engineering? And are there some principles we can adopt? What kind of benefits will we get in the process?
Thank you very much, Sanjay, for inviting us here. Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the first statement I usually make in order to help people understand what we talk about when we're talking about green software. I think some of the panelists that came up earlier on kind of touched on this subject as well. Is software the problem or is software the solution? And I think software can definitely be the solution to the climate crisis that we have right now, but it can also be a problem. And when we're talking about green software, we're talking about how do you build software that has, in a way that reduces the emissions that it's responsible for. And that's the focus of green software and green software engineering. We have a position, the kind of the principles that there are pretty much just 3 actions you can take to reduce the emissions of software. The first is making it use less energy or electricity, and that's because, as been mentioned before, electricity is an emitter of carbon emissions, but also using less physical infrastructure, less physical hardware. And since you do have to use some electricity, can you use that electricity in an intelligent way, in what's called a carbon aware way, in a way which uses lower carbon sources of electricity, or just helps transition the energy grid towards a future, towards a more renewable future. And that's kind of how we would describe kind of green software and the green software actions. The one thing I will say in addition to that is that although I'd say technology and sustainability has had some attention over the years, software has not. And once you start looking at sustainability through the lens of software, you do start seeing some very low-hanging fruit that is available right now to reduce emissions without significant investment.
Thank you so much, Asim. We will shift our gear here and talk about the challenges in green software and green software engineering. I'd like to ask Henry about his views around impact of software on the environment. Also, what are the challenges and gaps in the current carbon accounting method, and what are your views about bridging the gaps?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking that question. I think one of the kind of first thing that comes to mind is that kind of software is somewhat removed from the end user. So when we're using that software, we're designing it or building it, we don't see those impacts directly. And that's somewhat reflected in some of the issues with carbon accounting in the sense that it has pretty strictly defined boundaries. What's included? Do you own it? How you count those emissions? And we're really seeing that as we're kind of seeing a shift away from the traditional accounting, which is very like limited in scope, towards we're trying to think more around what does your software actually affect its entire stack from the end user all the way down through development to whether it's in cloud or somewhere else. And so I think one of the historical issues has been that limited scope, and we're trying to move beyond that currently. There are some other issues around like how you think about electricity and the limitations of timing, like the granularity of a lot of software or a lot of these standards are limited, so it doesn't provide those tools directly to the end users to think about how to actually reduce emissions. And so that's another big gap, is a lot of carbon accounting isn't a tool to end users to actually think about how to reduce emissions. I think one of the previous panelists actually addressed this, where they're saying like, how do the people who are actually implementing the software, doing the work every day, think about how to reduce emissions in all their actions? So I think those are two of the really big issues. There's like a gap between the end user and emissions, or the implementer, the software engineer, and the emissions, as well as like a scope issue saying we should encompass everything that software touches, not just what's owned by the company or something like that. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Henry. Absolutely. So, Professor Zelian, you have been researching this area for a long time. Can you share with us what are the common misconceptions, challenges, barriers when it comes to green software engineering?
Absolutely. So there are many challenges we're facing, I think, because this is a kind of like a new topic to the software industry. The two big challenges, in my opinion, are the general trend of bloated software and the awareness of the software impact on the environment. So let's talk about the first challenge, the bloated software. If we look back several decades, the hardware industry has been trying really hard to keep up with Moore's law. They actually have done a great job. Every new generation of hardware not only runs faster, but is also more energy efficient. However, if we look at the software industry, when we are being supplied with more and more powerful CPUs and larger DRAMs, more powerful hardware, we became kind of like less motivated to optimize our code and more passionate about adding new features to the software. So the software developers already got used to relying on the improvement of the hardware to carry out the inefficient code or bloated software. So these are the problem of the software size is getting bigger and bigger, and the efficiency of the code is not improving much. So the problem is now we have entered the post-Moore's law era. That means the room for hardware improvement is narrowing down quickly. We cannot rely on hardware forever. It is the time for the software industry to step up forward and taking the lead in green computing. That's why I think Green Software Foundation has a lot of work to do to promote this motion, to do that. So we would hope that the software industry, noticing the post-Moore's law, the trend, we would shift our design philosophies towards more efficient software. But unfortunately, what I have observed is the opposite trend. If you look at what happened in the past decade, we saw the booming of AI, we saw the booming of blockchain. Right? AI algorithm is very, power-hungry, resource-demanding software, and then the Bitcoin mining is a software system purposely designed for inefficiency, right? And then a couple of days ago, Facebook changed its name to Meta, right? Announced the very aggressive plan to build the metaverse. Microsoft is joining, a lot of other companies are joining. And then for metaverse, if you think about that, that's kind of scary, right? Because we're building a massive scale virtual world in parallel with our physical world. And then the metaverse will combine all the expensive solutions, software solutions, all together, which include cloud computing, blockchain, AI, AR, VR, and if we play games in the metaverse, we want high quality graphics rendering. We want a high FPS. Everything is putting, more and more power investment into this software world. How are we going to build a sustainable metaverse? Right? That's a huge challenge for the research on that part. So we don't have an answer for that. I think we need to do a lot of research on that. So the second challenge I would say is the unawareness of the software impact on environment. Today, according to the EDC, there are roughly about 27 million software developers in the world. If you ask them, how much energy does your code consume? What is the environmental impact of your software? The answer probably will be, I don't know. We can't blame them, right? Because we don't provide them tools to measure. We don't have the metrics to evaluate the software impact on the environment. So all of these indicate that we are still in the very early stage of green software engineering. A lot of research needs to be done. Metrics need to be in place as soon as possible. We need to develop the urgent needed power measurement tools to enable the software developers in this kind of sustainability perspective. Very few companies are now offering to, training for their employees, right, to train the current generation of software developers. At the universities, very few universities offer green computing courses in their computer science curriculum. We need to offer more green computing courses, right? All these are obvious barriers about green software engineering. Even for the pioneer software developers, they wanted to improve the energy efficiency of software. There are a lot of misconceptions. For example, the most common one I heard about is performance optimization and energy efficient optimization is the same thing. What they believe is that if I can make my code run faster, then my code will consume less amount of energy. So this is green software, so I don't have to learn new skill sets about green software engineering. Well, the other large group of developers, they consider performance optimization and energy efficient optimization as two separate goals. These two goals could conflict with each other, so we have to sacrifice one for the other. So I think Isim just mentioned the green software engineering is much more than the current understanding, so we can do a lot more than that. Back to you, Isim.
Thank you so much. That was such an interesting insight. I think we have to embed green software in the ESG strategy, absolutely, of every company. Let's now talk about the best practices that we see in the field of green software. And my question would be to both Asim and Ziliang around what are the best practices in green software engineering? How can green software engineering be achieved?
I can probably just go first on this one. I'll just repeat kind of some of the points that we mentioned before. So again, broadly, there's basically three areas, and everything that you can do to make software greener would fall into one or more of these buckets. So it's using less energy, and you really do have to think about it as we just mentioned, using less energy, because as Professor Ziliang said, you can make things more performant that increase energy. So you really do have to think about the energy consumption. And you do require a lot of knowledge around that, because the way a hardware device consumes electricity, it's not linear. You need to understand the aspects of different devices. Your mobile device acts very, very differently to a server device. Different server devices act differently. GPUs act differently to CPUs. So there's different kind of energy consumption behaviors across different devices. Using less hardware. I mean, a lot of, as you mentioned before, bloating is one of the aspects of it. It's very easy. It's cheaper just to buy hardware than it is to invest more time and energy into making your software, your entire software architecture more efficient. Both of these areas, require a lot of investment. One of the things I really I'm excited about the area of carbon awareness, which is the third area, is that it doesn't require as much investment, and it can result in some quite quick wins in reduction of emissions. And that's kind of the other area, which is carbon awareness, which is, can you use electricity, can you use lower carbon sources? I think Vishal actually mentioned on the previous panel, he specifically gave an example of 2 different carbon intensities, and that shows you the options that are available. But there's also a lot of nuance to that as well that Henry knows very well about that also. So I'll pass back to you, Professor Zilang, for any other comments on that.
Great points, SM. I would like to add a couple more points. First of all, I think green software engineering cannot be achieved in one day. It takes years of efforts, continuous efforts and consistent efforts. So I would say, right now, like I mentioned, we're still in the early stage. When the metrics are not in place, when the tools are not available yet, the software company can still do a lot of things. For example, we can try to identify the non-essential functionalities in the software and see if they're barely used. Then we can try to reduce the size of the software and also have a broad discussion. I think the previous panel, Ralph mentioned about this, right? If you could have a broad discussion across the company about the sustainability issues of software design, and then enable each employee and let them do their part. And then this could help with a strategic plan, a company, wise strategic plan about sustainability. If we could put sustainability at the core of software engineering process, this will help a lot in the long run. So the other thing I would want to say is, if you can follow what is the latest research, what is the latest tool development progress, and what is the latest best practices, and joining GSF, right, Green Software Foundation, will be a good way to do that. That will make sure that you are on trend, right? So you're with everybody else, and then you can try to apply, the latest research and practices in your company. When you try something in your company, start small, I would say. And then you don't want to start with the legacy code, the legacy software, because the cost will be higher. It's much easier to start with some new software project, and you start new and then try to apply some principles ASIM just talked about, and then learn as you go. So I think that might be the best strategy for now.
Great insights. And Henry, you have been researching on intelligent use of electricity or energy. Maybe you can add some of your perspectives on this topic.
Yeah, I think some of the key insights is that most people think of electricity as just kilowatt hours, but there's really significant differences in both timing and location. Increasingly around the world, we're actually seeing curtailment where we're throwing away excess renewables. And if you can train your software to run during those periods, you'll just prevent that clean energy from being thrown away. So it's opportunities like that that I think provide a massive opportunity for kind of making electricity consumption, in this case software, much cleaner. Can you shift that, if you're in a location that is running on dirty resources, can you shift that software to locations that's much cleaner, that's seeing curtailment-like events or stuff like that? So I think being aware that not all kilowatt hours are the same is a key insight, both from an efficiency, a timing, and a location standpoint, to go back to Asim's point.
And one of the things that we are aware of is the software carbon intensity specification, one of the early output from the Green Software Foundation. So my question again to you, Henry, and then to Asim, tell us a little bit more about what we can expect.
Absolutely. I think the thing I'm most excited about the new standard is that it's really a kind of a tool for developers to think about how their actions affect emissions globally. Like, they can take actions, they can implement things. It's very direct, and it's not like removed, done by a separate department, but it's intended to be embedded in the development process. Asim, do you want to kind of dig into some of the details around that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it's one of the things that we describe as is it's a score, not a total. It's a score for software applications. It's a new standard, a new specification we're developing as part of the foundation. Like we've heard, again, the previous panelists, and we've heard again and again and again, we need measurement, we need metrics. We need metrics specifically focused around software, and that's kind of what the intention of the software carbon intensity specification is. We're about to announce the first alpha version. I think we have our final call today, Henry, to get it over the line. And again, it's been designed from the ground up for software, and again for all software, not just cloud. We're extremely inclusive. It's for cloud, for client applications. It's for open source applications which do not necessarily have an organization that is leading it. There are some studies that have shown that about 90% of the code that's running inside enterprise organizations is open source software. And so we need a mechanism of being able to score open source software for emissions, not just organizations for emissions. And as Henry mentioned, it's been very intentionally designed from the ground up to incentivize investment to those three pillars that we talk about: reducing energy, reducing hardware, and making it carbon aware. We haven't let that be an accident of the calculation. It has been fundamental in the mechanism of the calculation. It enables comparability. That's one of the really great things about it. So it enables comparability between similar products. If you're evaluating a solution and you want to understand kind of how one product compares to another, it can help there. But it can also help from an internal perspective. Inside an organization, you can score your application, and as you make improvements, that score goes down. And being an engineer, I know that if you give an engineer a score and you tell them lower is better, you can usually be confident that they'll make that number go down. Yeah, we're really excited about it. I think it's going to be one of the main deliverables that we deliver this year.
I think really highlighting that last point, it like gives you a tool to evaluate choices as you are thinking about different options and building things, which is very exciting.
Great. I would just like to add that if you want to learn more about all the innovations and standards and other activities that is being driven by the ecosystem collectively, the Green Software Foundation, feel free to go and check out the Green Software Foundation website. And you're all welcome to be members and contribute to this mission of reducing emissions by 45% by 2030, in line with the Paris Agreement. So I hope today's conversation, demystified to some extent what is green software, what is the state of nation when it comes to green software and green software engineering, best practices, challenges, and how do you engage with the ecosystem. I'll now request Asma to check if there are any questions from the audience and then direct it to the panelist.
Indeed, yes, we do have some questions. This is a really good open question, actually. As an organization that is new to green software, what do you recommend are some initial steps we can take to implement this? Asim, can you help us with that?
Well, the very first step, I would say, is there's some material you can take. So there's a website right now called principles.green, and we will be absorbing that into the foundation shortly. And that is a set of principles, 8 core principles, which you can give as training to your staff, to people inside the organization. The very first thing is just to get on the same dictionary. Get everybody understanding the same terminology. We've mentioned a lot of stuff on this section today. We mentioned words you maybe have never heard of. There are concepts you would not have been taught in the software space. So the first step is just to get that level playing or level set everybody on the terminology. And I'd recommend they head to principles.green for that to begin with. And just the foundation website also, we have a lot of material there.
Here's another one. How relevant is green software engineering to other industries beyond the software industry? Zillian, can you help us with that?
Sure. So I think the software is eating the world. That means software is applied everywhere. It's in Industry 4.0. It's in all smart farming. It's in all kind of sectors, right? So the green software design, although we focus on the software industry itself for the Green Software Foundation, I think it's widely applicable to many other domains. So I would think that a good practice would be, while you're trying to apply this with another domain, you want to work with domain experts together. Because for domain experts, they understand the need, they understand the issues, the problems of that domain, which is the weakness of the software developers, right? So we want to work with them together and apply some of the principles ISIM mission to that domain. I believe that will give us a good result.
And just to quickly build on that, I think Andy in the previous presentation mentioned the significance of transportation. A very concrete example there is that we think of like transportation as very hardware focused, but as we get more EVs, those EVs are going to be consuming large amounts of electricity, and that charging software, the smart charging, is really a software solution. How they charge, when they charge, and it starts to bring those domains very close together. So I think software touches many of these things and will consume lots of electricity, have lots of emissions implications.
Thank you for that. Let's just go back a step, actually, because I want to make sure that everyone who's got a question gets it answered. Excuse me. How much carbon emissions, or how many carbon emissions, can we expect to reduce just by turning our software green? Henry?
I think it depends on how aggressive you are in your shifting load. Like, is your software really flexible? Does it have to run right away? The more flexible it is, the more opportunity you have to save. And also, are you constrained by geography? Can you run that information somewhere else? There are often political boundaries that you have to respect for data, but if you can shift across regions, that's really useful. I think it's going to need to happen in parallel with the greening of the electric grid. So we need that green electricity to take advantage of it with software. So the more renewables we build, the more opportunities there will be on the software side to take advantage of that green electricity. And so ultimately, I think it's going to contribute to green electric grids by having that load flexibility that we need to integrate all those highly variable renewables that we're anticipating being built.
And do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just in addition to that, because that's the energy story from a green software perspective, but there's also a hardware story as well. And I still believe the statistic is true, although double check it. The global average server utilization for on-premise, so not hyperclouds like Microsoft and Google and Amazon, but for on-premise servers, is still hovering around 10%. So that goes to show you that there's a lot of headroom available from a software perspective. From a hardware perspective, we're looking at kind of single digits improvements moving forward. Just that example alone will show you that there's kind of multiples of hundreds of percents potential for software improvements. And that's the kind of a potential headroom we have ahead of us.
Here's another one for you, probably for you, Asim, again. How do you see the GSF developing in future? What is the eligibility to join the foundation?
Oh, well, we are an open foundation. We are a wide tent. Anybody can join. We do have we have multiple levels, and at the general level, anybody can join. At the steering level, we do have some criteria on sustainability commitments, and you'll find that all on the website. But our intention is to be as inclusive, as diverse as possible. As Sanjay mentioned earlier on, we've got academia, we've got non-profits, we've got for-profits, but we've also got members from Japan all the way to the west coast of the US. So we do have a wide representation. Everybody's welcome. And we are here for the people who are in the business of building software. Our mission is to give them the knowledge, the tooling, the standards, grow up increase the set of people that are out there that you could hire inside your organizations with the knowledge to implement those reductions that we've talked about right now. That is the mission of the foundation now and moving forward.
Just before we end, is there anyone else who wants to add anything on any of the questions that have been asked so far? That's a no. I think, Zillian, you look like you were unmuting yourself there. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to add, if I could, the last point would be, green computing has been led by hardware industry for decades. It's our turn now as a software industry to make significant contributions to the world in terms of sustainability.
I would say that
on
was
that, we will leave it. Thank you very much for that. Thank you so much. Sanjay, thank you for facilitating the whole group. Great to hear about progress in the area, especially the vision and mission of the foundation, and what Zillian said there. It's our time now. I think that's a real battle cry. Now, I think it's clear from our sessions today that technology has a critical role to play in enabling sustainability. At the same time, we do need to be aware, however, of the emissions technology usage creates. What's needed, I suppose, at the end of the day, is a holistic approach that uses technology as a powerful weapon to address sustainability while making sure that it's deployed and used in the most energy efficient way possible. So a big thank you to everyone for joining us today, to taking time out of their day to contribute to this really important discussion. We hope you had an enjoyable and enlightening time with us, that you learned something that you can take away with you. Do stay safe and well, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.